I should have stayed away from her. That was the promise I made to myself the day Amelia walked into my house. But standing in that safe house outside Mexico City, with armed men searching for her and enemies closing in, I realized something terrifying. I was no longer protecting her because of a promise. I was protecting her because I could not live without her. Amelia looked at me with fear in her eyes and asked a question that nearly destroyed me. Why are you risking everything for me? I looked at her and finally said the truth I had buried for years. Because your father saved my life, and because loving you has become my darkest secret. And that was the moment everything changed. My name is Jude. Most people call me Señor Jude. Some call me a businessman. Others call me a criminal. The men who work for me call me boss. The men who fear me call me worse things. I do not care what people call me. Fear has never bothered me. Blood has never bothered me. Death stopped bothering me a long time ago. But there is one thing that has haunted me for over 20 years. Promise. A promise made by a dying man. And every mistake I made with Amelia began with that promise. 22 years ago, I was not the man I am today. I was younger, more reckless, more willing to trust people. That almost got me killed. Back then, I was trying to build something in Guadalajara. I was ambitious. I wanted power. I wanted respect. I wanted men to hear my name and think twice before crossing me. Those were dangerous years. Every week brought a new enemy. Every month brought a new betrayal. One night, everything fell apart. I remember the rain. I remember the sound of bullets. I remember running through a warehouse near the outskirts of the city while men chased me. Someone I trusted had sold me out. The men behind me wanted me dead. I was shot before I reached the exit. The bullet tore through my side. I kept running. I kept fighting. But I knew I was losing blood. I knew I was dying. That was when I met him. Miguel Alvarez, Amelia's father. At the time, he was just a stranger. He found me collapsed beside a dirt road. He should have left me there. Most people would have. But he didn't. He carried me into his truck. He drove me to a small property outside Guadalajara. And he saved my life. For weeks I recovered there. He never asked questions. He never demanded money. He never tried to use me. He simply helped me. Miguel was not a powerful man. He was not rich. He was not feared. But he was a good man. That made him stronger than most people I knew. One afternoon, while I was still recovering, he sat beside me outside his house. His wife was inside. Their little girl was playing in the yard. She could not have been older than 3. Dark hair, bright eyes, a small laugh that carried across the property. I remember watching her run through the grass. I remember thinking she looked happy. I did not know her name. I did not know that one day she would change my life. Miguel looked at his daughter and smiled. Everything I do is for her, he said. I nodded. He looked at me. You have children? No. You should someday. I laughed. At that age, children were the last thing on my mind. Power was all I cared about. Money, control, survival, nothing else. Miguel shook his head. One day you'll understand. I never forgot those words. A month later, my enemies found us. To this day, I still do not know how. Maybe someone followed me. Maybe someone talked. Maybe fate simply decided to punish a good man for helping the wrong person. The attack came at night. Bullets shattered windows. Men stormed the property. Everything happened too fast. I fought back. So did Miguel. But he was not trained for that kind of violence. He was a father, not a soldier, not a killer, a father. And fathers often pay the highest price. By the time the shooting ended, the attackers were dead. But Miguel was dying. I still remember the blood. I still remember kneeling beside him. I still remember the fear in his eyes. Not fear for himself. Fear for his family. His wife was crying. His daughter was asleep in another room, unaware that her world was about to change forever. Miguel grabbed my arm. His grip was weak, but his voice was strong. Promise me. I leaned closer. Promise me you'll protect them. I looked at him. I will. Promise me. I promise. He closed his eyes, and a few moments later he was gone. That was the night everything changed. Not only for his family. For me. Because I do not break promises. Especially promises made to dead men. Over the years, I quietly watched over them. I never got close. I never introduced myself. I simply protected them from the shadows. When money became a problem, help arrived anonymously. When dangerous people came too close, they disappeared. When threats appeared, they were removed. No one knew. Not Amelia. Not her mother. No one. That was how I intended to keep it. For years, everything worked. Then fate interfered. One afternoon, Lily came home from university excited about a new friend. She talked endlessly about her. She said this friend was smart, kind, loyal, different from everyone else. I barely listened. Lily always had stories. I had meetings, business, responsibilities. 1,000 things demanded my attention. Then one evening she showed me a photograph. A simple photograph. The moment I saw it, my entire world stopped. I recognized the face immediately. Not because I had seen her recently. Because I had seen her 20 years ago. Running through grass. Laughing beside her father. The little girl from that property outside Guadalajara. Amelia. I stared at the photo longer than I should have. Lily noticed. What do you think? I forced myself to stay calm. She seems nice. Lily smiled. She is. I handed the phone back. But something inside me had already shifted. That night I couldn't sleep. For the first time in years I found myself thinking about the past. About Miguel. About promises. About the little girl I had spent years protecting from a distance. I told myself it meant nothing. I told myself I was simply surprised. I told myself it would pass. Then Lily invited Amelia to stay at our house. And the moment I heard those words, I felt something I had not felt in years. Fear. Not fear of enemies. Not fear of death. Fear of what might happen if the past walked through my front door. Because for 20 years, Amelia had been a responsibility. Promise. A duty. But something deep inside me was already warning me that the moment I saw her again, she would become much more than that. And for the first time in my life, I prayed I was wrong. I have faced armed men without fear. I have negotiated with people who would kill me for a single mistake. I have watched empires rise and fall. None of that prepared me for the moment Amelia walked into my house. The day started like any other. Meetings, phone calls, reports from Guadalajara, updates from Monterrey, problems in Tijuana. By evening I was exhausted. All I wanted was a quiet dinner and a few hours of peace. Instead, fate was waiting for me. I arrived home later than expected. The gates opened. My men greeted me. Everything looked normal. Then I stepped into the living room. Lily ran toward me immediately. She wrapped her arms around me and complained about how long I had been away. I smiled and listened. Then I looked up, and I saw her, Amelia. For a moment the room disappeared. The voices disappeared. The noise disappeared. Everything disappeared except her. The little girl from Miguel's yard was gone. Standing in front of me was a young woman. Beautiful. Confident. Alive. I hated myself for noticing that immediately. I should have seen Miguel's daughter. I should have seen someone under my protection. Instead, I saw a woman. And that realization disturbed me. Lily introduced us. This is Amelia. As if I didn't already know. As if I hadn't quietly watched over her life for years. As if I hadn't received updates whenever there was a threat near her family. As if I hadn't spent countless nights ensuring she stayed safe without ever knowing my name. I looked into her eyes. The same eyes her father had. The same kindness. The same honesty. Something tightened inside my chest. Amelia, I said. Hearing her name out loud felt strange. Personal. Dangerous. It is good to meet you, Señor Jude. Her voice was calm. Respectful. She had no idea who I really was. No idea what I knew. No idea how many times our lives had crossed paths without her knowledge. And she definitely had no idea what was beginning to happen inside me. I told myself it was temporary. A shock. Nothing more. I was wrong. Very wrong. That evening at dinner, I learned something uncomfortable. I couldn't stop looking at her. Every time she spoke, I listened. Every time she smiled, I noticed. Every time she laughed at something Lily said, my attention shifted toward her without permission. It annoyed me. I spent years building discipline, years controlling every emotion that could be used against me. Yet one dinner with Amelia made me feel distracted. That was unacceptable. After dinner, I called Gustavo and Eduardo into my office. Both men had worked with me for years. They knew me better than most people. Unfortunately, that meant they noticed things. Gustavo closed the office door behind him. Eduardo sat across from my desk. Neither spoke immediately. That usually meant they were waiting for me to start. Instead, Gustavo spoke first. Something is wrong. I looked up from a file. What do you mean? You've read the same page 3 times. I closed the file. His observation irritated me because it was true. Eduardo exchanged a glance with him. Then he spoke carefully. Is it the girl? The room became silent. I stared at him. Be careful. He raised his hands slightly. We are. Gustavo folded his arms. You made us investigate her. Because she's in my house. No, Gustavo replied. You made us investigate her years ago. Neither man looked away. That was the problem with loyal people. They paid attention. I stood and walked toward the window. The lights of Mexico City stretched into the distance. Normally, the view helped me think. Not tonight. I knew her father, I finally said. The room remained quiet. Neither man interrupted. He saved my life. Understanding crossed their faces. Then Eduardo nodded slowly. That explains why you've protected her family all these years. Yes. Gustavo studied me. Does it explain the way you looked at her tonight? The question hit harder than it should have. I turned toward him. His expression remained serious. No judgment. No disrespect. Only concern. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. I wanted to tell him I was still in control. But I had built my organization on truth. Lying to my closest men served no purpose. So I gave the only answer I could. No. Neither man seemed surprised. That worried me. If they could see it already, then eventually others would too. And in my world, weaknesses attracted danger. The meeting ended shortly afterward. But sleep never came. Around midnight, I found myself standing outside the guest room where Amelia was staying. I told myself I was checking security. I told myself I was making sure everything was safe. The lie lasted approximately 5 seconds. I knew exactly why I was there. Because I wanted to see her. That realization should have sent me in the opposite direction. Instead, I knocked on her door. When she opened it, everything became worse. Moonlight spilled through the balcony doors behind her. Her hair fell loosely around her shoulders. She looked surprised to see me. And beautiful. Far too beautiful. I immediately hated the direction of my thoughts. I hope I didn't disturb you, I said. She stepped aside slightly. No, I entered. A mistake. The first of many. The room suddenly felt smaller. The air felt heavier. I could feel her nervousness. The problem was that I felt my own. I hadn't been nervous around a woman in decades. Yet standing there, I found myself carefully choosing every word. I asked if she was comfortable, if she needed anything. Simple questions. Safe questions. But my eyes kept returning to her face. Her father had trusted me. He had died trusting me. And standing there, I felt something that dishonored that trust. Something I never should have allowed. When I raised my hand toward her face, I stopped myself. That moment became one of the longest seconds of my life. Because I wanted to touch her. Not as a protector. Not as someone fulfilling a promise. As a man. The realization hit me like a bullet. I lowered my hand immediately. And for the first time in years, I retreated from something. I left her room. But I took the problem with me. The next day only made things worse. Every interaction became harder. Every conversation became more dangerous. The more I learned about Amelia, the more impossible she became to ignore. She was intelligent, kind, brave, loyal to Lily, respectful to everyone around her. everything her father would have wanted her to become. And every quality pulled me closer. I began looking for reasons to be near her. Small reasons. Harmless reasons. At least that was what I told myself. Then one afternoon, I caught myself watching her laugh in the garden. The realization struck me immediately. I wasn't protecting her anymore. Not only protecting her, I was falling for her. The truth settled heavily inside me. I should have stopped then. I should have created distance. I should have sent her away. Instead, I made the mistake that changed everything. I stayed, because despite all my discipline, despite all my experience, despite all my rules, I wanted one more day with her, then another, and deep down I already knew where that path would lead. The problem was that my heart had started making decisions my mind no longer controlled. And men like me are most dangerous when we lose control. Not because of what we do to others, because of what we are willing to do for the one person we cannot let go. By then, I was already becoming that man. I just hadn't admitted it yet. There are moments in a man's life when he realizes he is losing a battle. Not against an enemy, not against circumstances, against himself. For me, that realization came 2 weeks after Amelia entered my home. By then, every warning sign was impossible to ignore. I looked for her when I entered a room. I listened for her voice without meaning to. I noticed when she smiled. I noticed when she was quiet. I noticed everything. And that was dangerous. Because in my world, attention has consequences. The more important someone becomes to you, the more vulnerable they become. I understood that better than anyone. I built my entire life around that truth. Yet every day Amelia became more important. Every day I became weaker. And every day my enemies moved closer. It started with a phone call from one of my men in Monterey. A shipment had been intercepted. 2 trusted associates had disappeared. Another had been found dead. None of that surprised me. Violence was part of my world. What surprised me was the message left behind. We know where to hurt you. At first I dismissed it. People threatened me all the time. Most threats meant nothing. Then another message arrived. Then another. Different sources. Different locations. The same meaning. Someone was studying me. Someone was looking for weaknesses. Someone was being patient. That concerned me, because patient enemies are often the most dangerous. One evening, Gustavo entered my office carrying a file. His face was serious. That alone was enough to tell me the news wasn't good. He placed the file on my desk. You need to see this. I opened it. Inside were photographs. Surveillance photographs. Several showed Lily. That was expected. My daughter had always been a possible target. Then I turned another page and saw Amelia. My blood turned cold. The photographs showed her leaving a bookstore, walking beside Lily, standing outside a cafe, crossing a street. Someone had been watching her. Someone had been documenting her movements. For how long? I looked up sharply. Who took these? We don't know yet. The calmness in Gustavo's voice only made me angrier. I stood so quickly my chair nearly fell backward. Find out. We are trying. Trying isn't enough. Gustavo remained still. Years ago that would have irritated me. Now I understood why he wasn't reacting. He wasn't afraid of my anger. He was worried about what it meant. You care about her, he said quietly. The room became silent. I looked away. Not because he was wrong, because he was right. And saying it out loud made everything real. I made a promise. Gustavo nodded. You've protected her for 20 years because of that promise. Yes. And now? I said nothing. The silence answered for me. His expression softened slightly. Not judgment. Concern. The concern of someone watching a friend walk toward danger. You need to be careful. I laughed once. A bitter sound. You're warning me? I'm warning you because I know what happens when people become important to you. The words hit harder than he realized. Because he was right. Every important person in my life had paid a price. Every single one. I wasn't afraid for myself. I was afraid for Amelia. Because if my enemies discovered how I felt, They would come for her, and they would not hesitate. The following week became a nightmare. I started noticing things. Vehicles appearing too often. Unknown faces near places Amelia visited. Questions being asked about Lily's friends. Individually, they meant little. Together, they formed a pattern. Someone was gathering information. Someone was getting closer. One afternoon, I stood in the garden watching Amelia and Lily talk. They were laughing about something. For a moment, they looked like ordinary young women. Free from danger. Free from consequences. I envied them. Then Amelia looked in my direction. Our eyes met, and the world narrowed. God help me, I couldn't look away. Neither could she. The moment lasted only seconds, but it felt longer. Long enough for me to realize I was already lost. Because I no longer saw Miguel's daughter. I saw Amelia. Only Amelia. The woman who had somehow found her way through every wall I had built around myself. That realization should have frightened me. Instead, it brought something worse. Acceptance. I stopped pretending. At least with myself. I loved her. The truth settled inside me like a final sentence. Quiet. Certain. Permanent. And once I accepted it, everything changed. Because love creates responsibility. And responsibility creates action. I doubled security. Added more guards. Expanded surveillance. Created emergency plans. Not for Lily. For Amelia. Every decision revolved around her safety. Every strategy considered her protection. And people noticed. Especially Gustavo. Especially Eduardo. But neither man said anything. Not anymore. Because by then, there was nothing left to say. The breaking point came late one night. I was reviewing reports when Eduardo entered without knocking. That alone was enough to get my attention. He never interrupted meetings unless absolutely necessary. His expression confirmed my fears immediately. We found them. I stood. Who? The people following Amelia. My heart became ice. How many? 3. What do they want? Eduardo hesitated. A rare occurrence. Then he handed me a folder. I opened it. Inside were photographs. More surveillance. More observations. Schedules. Locations. Patterns. Details. Far too many details. My jaw tightened. This wasn't casual observation. This was preparation. Someone was building a plan. Someone intended to use Amelia. I turned another page. Then another. And another. The final page contained a single handwritten note. I read it once. Then again. The words burned themselves into my memory. The girl matters more than the daughter. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Not because I didn't understand. Because I understood perfectly. They knew. Maybe not everything. But enough. Enough to recognize that Amelia mattered. Enough to realize she was more valuable than Lily. Enough to make her a target. Rage exploded inside me. Pure. Cold. Violent. The kind of rage that destroys lives. I closed the folder carefully. Too carefully. Eduardo recognized the warning signs immediately. We'll handle it. No. My voice was calm. Dangerously calm. I'll handle it. He didn't argue. Neither would Gustavo. Both men knew what happened when someone threatened a person under my protection. And Amelia was far more than that now. Much more. I spent the next 48 hours hunting every person connected to the operation. Not personally. I was smarter than that. But every order came directly from me. Every decision. Every consequence. By the end, the network watching Amelia no longer existed. Unfortunately, their disappearance created another problem. Someone powerful had financed them. Someone wealthy. Someone patient. Someone willing to lose people in order to gather information. Which meant the real threat was still out there. Watching. Waiting. Planning. And eventually, moving. 3 nights later, I found myself standing outside Amelia's room again. I hadn't intended to go there. At least that's what I told myself. The truth was simpler. I needed to see her. Needed to know she was safe. Needed proof that she was still within reach. When she opened the door, relief hit me harder than expected. She looked tired, confused, concerned. And beautiful. Always beautiful. You've been avoiding me, she said softly. The honesty of the statement surprised me. I almost smiled. Maybe. Her eyes searched mine. Why? There were 100 possible answers. Only one honest one. Because if I got any closer, I would cross a line I could never uncross. Because every moment with her weakened my judgment. Because loving her had become the most dangerous thing in my life. But I couldn't tell her any of that. Not yet. So I gave a different answer. The world I'm part of is complicated. She stepped closer. So am I. My heart tightened. God help me. She had no idea what she was doing to me. No idea how close I was to losing the last pieces of my restraint. No idea that somewhere beyond the walls of this house, people were already planning ways to use her against me. And she definitely didn't know the truth I had hidden for 20 years. The truth about her father. The promise. The debt. The secret that connected our lives long before she ever met Lily. But she was going to learn. Soon. Because the storm was coming. And when it arrived, every secret would finally be exposed. There are secrets a man keeps because they protect him. And there are secrets a man keeps because they protect someone else. The truth about Amelia belonged to the second kind. For 20 years I carried it alone. For 20 years I convinced myself it was the right thing to do. But secrets have a way of finding daylight, especially when lives are at stake. And by the time the storm finally arrived, I could no longer keep the truth hidden. The attack came on a Thursday night. I remember the exact day because I had spent the afternoon watching Amelia laugh with Lily in the garden. For a few hours, everything felt normal, almost peaceful. That should have warned me. Peace rarely lasts in my world. Just after midnight, my phone rang. Eduardo. I answered immediately. His voice was urgent. We have movement. Every instinct in my body sharpened. Where? Near the northern perimeter. I stood from my desk. How many? At least 6. 6. That was enough to be dangerous. But not enough to be the real threat. People who wanted my attention often sent a smaller group first. A distraction. A test. A way to measure response time. I grabbed my jacket and headed toward the hallway. By the time I reached the security room, Gustavo was already there. Surveillance feeds covered the screens. Several armed men moved near the outer wall. Too confident. Too visible. Exactly as I suspected. A distraction. Then one of my men spoke. His voice turned the room cold. Sir. We have another team. I looked at the monitor. A second group. Smaller. Smarter. Approaching from a blind spot. Moving toward the guest wing. Toward Amelia. The world inside me went still. Not fear. Not panic. Something much colder. The kind of calm that comes before violence. I turned to Eduardo. Lock down the property. He nodded. I turned to Gustavo. With me. Neither man hesitated. We moved immediately. By the time I reached the guest wing, alarms were already sounding. Doors were locking. Guards were moving into position. But I knew something my men didn't. If the attackers had gotten this far, then someone had helped them. Someone inside. Someone who knew the property. That realization made everything worse. I reached Amelia's door and pushed it open. She was awake, confused, frightened. The sound of alarms echoed through the house. What is happening? She asked. I crossed the room and took her hand. We are leaving. What? Now? For once, she didn't argue. Something in my face must have told her how serious the situation was. We moved quickly through a private corridor hidden behind a bookshelf. Very few people knew it existed. I designed it years ago for emergencies. As we descended the narrow staircase, Amelia finally spoke. Jude. I looked at her. She had never called me that before. Not once. The sound hit me harder than it should have. What is it? Her voice trembled. Am I the reason they're here? The question followed me down every step. Because for the first time I couldn't deny it. I couldn't protect her with half-truths anymore. I couldn't keep pretending. Yes. She stopped walking. The pain in her eyes nearly broke me. Why? I closed my eyes for a moment. Then I made a decision. No more secrets. No more lies. She deserved the truth. All of it. The safe house sat outside Mexico City. Remote. Secure. Hidden. By sunrise, only a handful of people knew we were there. Amelia sat across from me in a small living room. The fear had faded from her face. Now there was only confusion. Questions. Too many questions. And I owed her answers. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then I finally broke the silence. I knew your father. Her eyes widened immediately. What? I knew him before you were old enough to remember me. The room became completely silent. I told her everything. About Guadalajara. About the night I was shot. About the man who saved my life. About the weeks I spent recovering on his property. About the attack. About the promise. Every word. Every detail. I watched emotions move across her face. Shock. Disbelief. Pain. Sadness. And finally, understanding. When I finished speaking, tears filled her eyes. My father asked you to protect us? Yes. And you did. I nodded. For 20 years. She stared at me. You helped my family? Whenever it was necessary. Without telling us? That was the promise. A tear rolled down her cheek. My mother always said strange things happened after my father died. I said nothing. There was nothing to add. Because she already understood. For a long moment, she simply sat there, absorbing everything. Then she asked the question I feared most. Why didn't you tell me? I looked into her eyes. The answer was simple, but saying it out loud wasn't. Because the truth no longer belonged only to her father. The truth belonged to us. I stopped protecting you because of a promise. Her breath caught. I continued. I started protecting you because I couldn't imagine losing you. Silence. Heavy. Meaningful. Dangerous. Everything changed in that moment. Because there was nowhere left to hide. No more excuses. No more distance. Only truth. Hours later, Gustavo arrived with news. The attack had failed. Several men had been captured. One had talked. And the answer surprised all of us. The operation wasn't ordered by a rival organization. It was ordered by someone much closer. A businessman. A former ally. Someone who wanted leverage. Someone who believed Amelia was my weakness. In a way, he was right. Because she was. The difference was that he mistook weakness for vulnerability. And those are not the same thing. Weakness makes a man careless. Love makes a man dangerous. He learned that lesson the hard way. The threat ended within a week. Quietly. Permanently. After that, no one came looking for Amelia again. No one was foolish enough. A few days later, we sat together on the balcony of the safe house. The mountains stretched into the distance. The air felt peaceful. For the first time in a long while, neither of us had to run. Neither of us had to hide. Amelia leaned against the railing, looking at the horizon, thinking. I already knew what she was thinking about. Her father, the promise, everything she had learned. Finally, she looked at me. You carried that secret alone for 20 years. Yes. Why? I smiled faintly. Because your father trusted me. She held my gaze. Then she asked the question from my worst fears and my deepest hopes. And what happens now? I stepped closer. Close enough to see every emotion in her eyes. Close enough to tell the truth. The promise is finished. She looked surprised. What do you mean? I reached for her hand. The day I brought you here, I fulfilled the last part of my promise. Her fingers tightened around mine. And now, I smiled. A real smile. One I hadn't felt in years. Now every choice I make is my own. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The world seemed very quiet. Very still. Then Amelia smiled. And in that moment, I understood something her father had tried to teach me all those years ago. Power wasn't the most important thing. Fear wasn't. Control wasn't. Love was. The one thing I spent my entire life avoiding had become the thing I valued most. Miguel had been right. It only took me 20 years to understand. I looked at the woman beside me. The woman I had protected from the shadows. the woman who had somehow found her way into every corner of my heart. And for the first time in a very long time, the future didn't frighten me, because whatever came next, we would face it together.